Let's go. Welcome everyone to our stream for True Detective Season 2. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and gotta credit Damon with the idea. And I'll admit that this was my first time watching the season, and I was pleasantly surprised. I had seen some stuff before, and there is some bad in this season, but to me, this is the second best season of True Detective, and that's just what I want to say. But it's good to be back, Damon. What were your thoughts on this season?
Going on this project, man, the goal of it was just to cover some crossover from the work of art that was season one to what we see in season two, and maybe to try to pick up the pieces and see where it went right and where it went wrong. Okay. So when this came out, we could take you back to a simpler time in 2015. LeBron James had not won his fourth ring yet, but he was about to be on his way. We had a little bit less political turmoil going down, and I think we were both going into senior year of college.
Yeah, we're pretty old.
This was one of the most anticipated season twos that I can remember in my time. Like obviously that's shaded by my bias as who I am when I watch TV, but people were hot for this one. Nick's first solo project, Cary Fukunaga was not on the project due to the anthology model, but people were suspecting that it had a little bit to do with Nick's ego as well. Who's to say? I'm not going to point fingers. There was a Fukunaga quote about working on season one that's pretty telling about what we see in season two. Nick is a really good writer, but I do think he needs to be edited down. It becomes too much about the writing and not enough about the momentum of the story. My struggle with him was to take some of these long dialogue scenes and put some air into them. We differed on tone and taste. This is where we run into a lot of our issues with season two. The style is noir. So if you're into noir, this is awesome for you. Huge back in the 40s and 60s. Think of the detective protagonist that borders on anti-hero, the kind of guy that like sits lurking around the corner, huffing a cigarette, trying to solve a case when he himself is maybe not so good of a person. Think of cynical beliefs going against a system or a conspiracy. If you've seen Chinatown, if you've seen Sin City, these should ring a bell for you. I watched Chinatown as a film class in college, and this was the closest thing I'd seen to a Cali noir at the time. Here we go again. Inherent Vice is also a more modern take on it. There's a little sprinkle of noir in the Batman, and to some degree, comedies like Big Lebowski too. Usually, you see it in a depressing urban setting, which is a lot like this one. If you think noir sounds like season one, that's very true. But season one noir is like taking a dip into the swimming pool, where season two is a full fledged cannonball into the deep end, right? The setting in Vinci, Cali that we're going to kick into in season two is actually based on Vernon, California, a real city near LA where there's been a ton of corruption. Was prosecuted pretty heavily in the 2010s. And to appreciate the season, you got to watch it with that in mind. Like it's almost like this campy noir creation that you have to buy into, because if you don't, you are going to see some of the clunky dialogue. You are going to see some of the performances that are a little uneven at times. But when you're doing a rewatch like this, you owe it to yourself to try to one up on that. Rewatching this one and liking it way more, I almost feel like I owe season four a rewatch too. But that's a question for another day.
Oh no. Um,
Just saying.
yeah. I mean, hey, listen. I will say this. When season 5 comes out and we watch it, I'm not gonna go into it with preconceived notions just because I didn't like season 4. But um, great points on that. Also, Damon, sick fucking graphic for the noir. For the noir part, I was a little bit late on getting to this graphic because I popped a few edibles before this, but I'm glad that
What
we
can you
got
do?
there. Exactly. What can we do? So, all right, we'll get into it. We're just gonna break it down scene by scene. I gotta say, this is a confusing ass season. I had to rewatch parts. I read a ton of stuff on Reddit, Wikipedia, and all that to understand it. And I think that was kind of what Damon just touched on. Is that's what makes this season a little bit difficult because it's really hard to follow. But let's just get started. We open up, and the opening scene of episode 1 is we see Ray Velcoro, and I think he's a detective for Vinci PD, and he's dropping his son Chad off at school. Velcoro's played by Colin Farrell, And Chad is there, and we could tell that Velcoro is divorced from Chad's mom. We find out that was Velcoro's ex-wife, and Chad is this. He's a quiet, nice boy, and then he's worried because the kids at school bully him, and he doesn't want to be in school as a result. And Ray, you could tell Ray's this really tough dude, and it's hard for him to connect with his son, but he obviously loves his son very much. So he's like, yeah, you got that camping trip next weekend. And Chad's like, yeah, I do. And Ray's like, how do you like the new shoes I got you? Because Ray just got Chad some new shoes. And then Ray's like, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And, your mom and your stepdad, Rich, are going to come pick you up. And he's like, he tells Chad to be strong. So then Chad walks out, and you could see these kids bully him, or like make a comment about his sweater as he walks by. Just textbook, pretty bad bullying. And I'm going to pause there, Damon.
You forget how mean kids can be. Like, you remember going back to middle school, Chen, like
Yeah.
kids used to say some heinous shit to each other back then.
Yeah, fucking, it's brutal.
The red hair insults too, like all that stuff, like especially for a kid like Chad, not great. Doesn't seem like the smoothest father-son relationship the more we take a look at this. Both are working through some stuff. Is there a more classic desperate divorce dad move than to buy the kid a really nice gift that doesn't really fit him, but he just kind of like wants, like, hey, look at these brand new Nikes for you. I got you. I still love you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
when Chad's getting out, he's like, now be proud. Like, I've never seen anybody say that to a kid they're dropping off at school unless they're really going through it. Even so, kind of a weird thing to say to your son right off the bat. This highlights that Ray is kind of a strange cat, but he's just trying his best, really.
Yeah. And then we cut to the next scene, which is Ray in this like small little office, and he's talking to this lawyer, and this lawyer is this woman who's basically asking about Chad and asking about like Ray's previous relationship, and we find out that Ray's ex-wife, Chad's mom, was raped, and she was raped around the time that they were trying to get pregnant and have a kid, and they never ran paternity tests, so there is a chance that Chad could be the kid of the rapist, and that would be obviously devastating. But according to Ray, he tells the lawyer that they never caught the guy, but we don't know how truthful he's being. But basically what happened after that obviously basically destroyed the relationship. His ex-wife, the mom, had to just like basically go away for 2 months, and then when she came back, she wanted divorce. So Ray raised Chad for the first 2 months by himself, and he really wants to be in his son's life. And right now, he's been sending voice notes to Chad. Basically, him and Chad have been communicating via voice notes. And basically what he's trying to do with this lawyer is to get expanded visitation rights. So he wants to see Chad more frequently, probably get it up to once a weekend, and then maybe eventually get it up to even more. And he even tries to like pay up and try to get the lawyer to, make something happen. But basically she's trying to help him, and she tells him like, look, more money isn't really going to change this right now. It's going to be a tough battle. So what did you think about that?
I love the camera angles when we kick this shot off, where you start on the close up and it fades back into it and you drift into the conversation. This is maybe the most intense detective in the entire True Detective anthology. Like,
Over
I know
Rust,
that Rust,
think?
I think Rust was intense, but I think Ray is always on. Like, it's really hard to explain. Like, he seems like he just has this like something fueling him that is just so dark, and he is just super intense, especially in this scene. Him trying to fork over the money also helps clue us into like what he's up to in his day-to-day in Vinci too, because it fits in a little more with how they roll over there.
Yeah. Let's keep it going. And we then flash back, or actually the lawyer's the one who mentions it, because they have to obviously investigate Ray's background. So she has to, in order to advocate for Ray, she needs to know a lot about Ray's life. And we're going to see that theme kind of come up a little bit later as well. But hold on, I'm just shifting my mic a little bit higher. Actually, now I got to turn it a little bit lower. Okay. So she mentions like, hey, 8 years ago, you were part of the LA Sheriff's Department, I think. Yeah, just the Sheriff's Department. Now he's in Vinci PD, so he's a detective, so it's a different position. But we flash back to younger Ray 8 years ago, and he pulls up to this like small little, I don't know, dive bar or like back room type of like. Do you know what that was, Damon?
I think it's a dive bar that's just implied to be a safe place to talk to Frank.
Got it, got it. So we meet Frank Semyon. Semyon, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Frank Semyon.
Okay, so we meet Frank, and hold on, let me scroll back. And Frank is at this point he's a criminal, but like 8 years ago, so he's kind of just like in gangs and shit like that. Hold on, give me a second. And Frank is talking to Ray, and he's like, "Hey, we basically we know who was the one who attacked your wife, and we got him. And here's a picture of him, and he was the one bragging about it." And Ray doesn't really ask any questions. He just kind of takes it and then leaves. And, we don't see what he actually does, but it's implied that he goes out and basically like kills the guy. And one thing that's interesting is that Ray asked Frank, "Well, what do you want from me for getting this information?" And Frank says, "This is pretty funny. This is also part of the criticism of this season, which was the dialogue was like, they just went for every single line to try to be a banger. And like sometimes you got lines like, yeah, maybe we'll, when Frank tells Ray asks Frank, what do you want from me? And Frank goes, yeah, maybe we'll talk sometime. Maybe not. It's just like, come on, man, that's some cheesy ass shit. But still, I love this season. So, whatever. But so we see that flashback. So we know that 8 years ago when Frank was still in the crime game and Ray was part of LA Sheriff's Department, he and Frank had their first like real start of their relationship because Frank dropped intel. So I'm going to take a pause there.
This was probably the most important relationship in the season as we keep going on. So it was a cool first look at it. It is funny how a haircut and a little bit of gel can make a guy look 10 years younger because Colin Farrell looks like he reverse aged a whole decade. The initial chemistry is okay between these guys, like you mentioned, Chen. Some of that weird dialogue choices that were made here. Basically, whenever you see Frank, the cheat code is to view him as your typical gangster from like the 30s or 40s, but it's 2010 or so. So it's a little bit of an adjustment to make. But when he says stuff like, this will not stand, like it almost seems like the Coen brothers wrote it, but in a weird context. So you just kind of got to bear with him. And the more you allow Frank to grow on you, the better character he becomes.
Yes. Okay, let's keep going. And speaking of Frank, then we now see Frank Semyon, and it's present day Frank. So present day Frank, he's a little bit older, he's more grizzled. He's looking out from this beautiful home, and we get some more shots of the house. It's like this nice little mansion in the hills, and he's kind of going through his morning routine, and we see his wife. His wife's name is Jordan. Let me pull this up. Oh, I got character description. So his wife's name is Jordan, and she knows that her husband is has made a lot of money in crime and stuff, but she's 100% supportive, and she's talking about this big day that they have, and we're gonna find out what this big day is very shortly. So then Frank then pulls up at Vinci Gardens Casino. Damon, did he own this casino or did he manage it?
So from what I've seen, I think he runs the casino. Like I don't know from this point of view, like I think he runs it and owns it. Like I think it's kind of that's where he's ended up after the club. That's what he rises to.
Okay. So he's running this like low, like small stakes kind of casino, but it's obviously making good money. And that's basically where he runs his shop. And we see him basically in the casino like office, and he's talking about the whole deal. And he mentions this name Caspere, this man whose last name is Caspere, pitching some developers. And then he also mentions that these Russians are in for $5 million. So there's some big deal going on that Frank is involved in. We're gonna find out more about that deal even in this episode. So he talks about a man named Osip, and Osip is this Russian gangster. So Osip is supposed to pull up, but he's this Russian Jewish gangster who's coming through customs, and he's a bit late. They haven't heard from him, and Frank's right hand man, no, not Logan. I almost said Logan Blake. Those names are just so similar to me, man. But Blake says, maybe I should have gone to the airport. We get this funny ass line where Frank goes, "Never do anything out of hunger, not even eat." Not even eating.
Dude, that's got to be the roughest line of the episode.
Roughest line of the episode by far. So they're waiting on Osip to pull up, and then there's also this article in this paper basically calling out Vinci for being the most corrupt district in LA County. And apparently it's written by this author named, I think, Dan Hauser. And this article is actually just the first of an 8-part series, and it talks about like corruption, sweatshops, like bribery, all that stuff. Now, it doesn't mention Frank by name, but this is part 1 of 8, right? So if it's talking about corruption, and if Frank's a criminal, he's risen pretty high, and he's running the casino, like you say, David, and he's probably involved on some of this, corruption, and they got to get rid of this story. So Blake's like, hey, we could put one of our other guys, one of our other goons on this reporter, and Frank's like, nope, go get Velcoro. So he trusts our man Ray, and basically they got to kill this story so Frank doesn't get in trouble. Blake says something foolish where he's like, well, right now you're not touched right now, and Frank's just like, dude, you're a fucking idiot. They're gonna, obviously they're gonna find me. And even Frank's wife Jordan is like, don't be a dumb fuck. So introduction to how Frank does business. Thoughts on that?
The fascinating part about how they start Frank off here, and we're going to get a little more into this like throughout the next episode as well, because we see more evidence for it, is that he is a successful gangster, right? We've seen the evidence. It seems that he's running a casino. Granted, it looks like the kind of casino that you hit up in Vegas after you've struck out at all the name brand MGM spots and you want to turn your last $25 into dollar beers and a big time rebound. But that's beside the point. It's still running a casino,
Yeah.
He is trying to go legit. He's trying to impress some big fish to make some stuff happen. So he's trying to bridge that gap out of the street life into the legitimate life. Hence the classic insecure middle-aged man shots we get of him staring into the mirror at his house, contemplating his own mortality at the start of this. So the more I see of Frank in this, like, he becomes a 3-dimensional gangster pretty quickly, even if he is delivering some crazy lines in the beginning.
Yeah. Great points there. And then we get this shot of this old man in shades riding in this car, and he's motionless. And we know that this is actually a man named Ben Caspere, who was the city manager of Vinci. And it's the guy that Frank is mentioning earlier when he says, Caspere is talking to the developers and stuff. So Caspere is supposed to be at this meeting, and because he's involved in actually making the real pitch. He manages Vinci's affairs as the city manager, and he's just in this car taking a ride, and we see someone else driving, and we see this crow mask in the passenger seat. So it's an ominous shot right there, and then we very quickly cut to another detective that we're soon going to meet, or technically not a detective, she's a lieutenant, but this is oh god, I had to just show the ass shot. Fantastic ass. But this is Lieutenant, I think it's Lieutenant Ani Bezzerides. So she's a detective sergeant of Ventura County Sheriff's Office. So to keep track of all of this, Velcoro is the detective of Vinci Police Department, and now we get introduced to our second detective, Ani Bezzerides, who's detective sergeant of Ventura County Sheriff's Office. And God, I was just so wrong earlier, Damon. But so she's making breakfast. She's got this dude Steve over, and like maybe Steve tried something dirty in bed or whatever. And he's like kind of apologizing about it, and she's just kind of like, whatever, I don't care. Okay, can you please leave? It's just kind of post nut clarity that she's getting hit with, and she's just like, hey, leave. And Steve's like, yeah, but like, do you want to chill and do stuff? And she's like, no, go. I'm going to work. So pretty cold introduction. I'm going to pause there before the raid, but thoughts on the opening scene with Ani Bezzerides, played by Rachel McAdams.
She's very in charge. I always used to get Rachel McAdams and Elizabeth Banks mixed up when I was a kid. It was just one of those like things. Like there are a bunch of other examples of it too, but it was funny to see her shooing the guy out of the apartment, swapping the gender role a little bit with the whole detective angle. We are going to get into some connections that she has to Rust, actually, in this scene, if you look closely. So there's a stack of books that we see when we enter the kitchen. A lot of them are loosely connected to spiritual guides based on accounts of former samurais, which kind of reminds you of some of those books that we saw in Rust's old apartment, like a lot of the philosophical, a lot of the religious texts. So she is clearly a deeper thinker in some regard. The Jameson Chinese food, a gun, a knife, and a badge on the counter. Like, goddamn, dude, McNulty would be so proud about this.
That is a
This
hell of
is,
a combination. JMO Chinese food.
dude,
God
this is the
damn.
ultimate bachelorette pad, man. But she's definitely like her own woman and her own person, and I think that can be tough, especially written. Nick Pizzolatto definitely gets a lot of critique for some, being like an overly masculine type of writer, but I enjoyed her as a character, and I enjoyed what we're going to see from her as well throughout this.
Yep. So right after that, we see that she goes on this raid, and they raid this farm in California, and they raid it because they think it's like this underground brothel, and they see all these girls. I'm trying not to pull up the naked pictures on this because we see some, obviously we see some naked women in the stream, so I'm gonna try to like avoid those landmines right now so YouTube doesn't block us. But let me see. Okay, yeah, so she got them all lined up, like, everyone's handcuffed. They handcuff the person who runs it, and apparently it's just a webcam business. There's no sex, going on. It's like private subscribers, so technically they're not breaking the law at all. They're probably just making a ton of money, and it looks like all of the girls are pretty annoyed too because they're all in on it and they're trying to make money. So no one's getting arrested, and but as Anne is so there's kind of egg on Anne's face, but as she's leaving, she sees this girl in blue hair. Her name is actually Athena, and she is Annie's younger sister. So Athena is actually working at this webcam farm as well, and this pisses off obviously Annie. So they kind of just get in this argument where Annie's like, "You're doing porn," and then Athena's like, "I'm a performer. Like, leave me alone." All this stuff, and you can kind of see how that relationship is. It's really just Annie trying to maybe be a little bit too strict on her sister, and then her sister probably rebelling and doing some crazy ass shit that she probably shouldn't be doing, but at the same time, she's free to do whatever she wants, and that freedom is something that bothers Annie, and they kind of get in this argument, and she tells Annie to fuck off. So, thoughts on that?
Just one piece of cringy dialogue highlight for you from Annie's sister to her. You know what you say are my problems are really your fucking problems.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking
It's
terrible.
it's like guys, like we get it. We didn't really need that there.
Yeah, that's the problem with this season is just there's so many lines like that you would write as a first draft line and then
Yes.
probably just come back to, but wasn't this season rushed or something?
This was the one that was pretty quickly on the heels after. I think it was like a year and a half after season 1, and like Carrie was off the project, so I don't think there was a lot of editing or a lot of collaborating on some of the dialogue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that's kind of, we just get a lot of these type of lines that are just so corny, but the scenes are still cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, so let's keep it going. So then we cut back to Velcoro. Also, there's so many random characters in this season, so it does get kind of hard to follow sometimes. So I'm just gonna always be repeating names, not even for you guys, but for me, for my sake. But Velcoro returns back to the police station, and he's greeted by his superiors. He's greeted by his lieutenant and his chief, and we'll see them in a second. And they hand him the article, the same article that Frank was handed earlier by his man Blake, talking about Vinci corruption. And obviously, they're not happy about it. So we first see his lieutenant. I think his name is Burris, Detective Kevin Burris. So he's his lieutenant, and then we see the chief, William Holloway. So Burris and Holloway are just like, yeah, obviously the story is bad, but there's other stuff we have to worry about. Ben Caspere has been missing for 2 days. So we also know that Frank knows Caspere, and Caspere is supposed to be at the casino to pitch the developers, but he's gone right now. And apparently he's been gone for 2 days, and they want Velcoro to go find him. And they've tried to do all the basic checks on Caspere, like track his phone and stuff, but everything's off. And the mayor of Vinci, this dude named Mayor Chisani, he's panicking as well. And apparently his office has been busy because of some big meeting today. So that meeting is going to actually take place at the casino. So the mayor is in on this meeting and pitch that Frank is giving as well. But this story doesn't make any of the Vinci PD or their officials look good. So they're like, Velcoro, first figure out where the fuck Caspere is, because that's really important. And you have to take this man named Teague Dixon with him. And based on Velcoro's reaction, Teague Dixon is clearly a shitty detective, but they're just like, nope, you got to take Dixon with you. So that's a little bit sketchy, and we'll see why down the line. And then Velcoro is like, where do I start? And they tell him, go to the city manager's office to start. So more characters being introduced. What'd you think?
Typical like noir characteristic is you see some of these side characters propped up, and then there are these sides of different conspiracies, different powers at play here. Seems like Ray is just being used as a blunt object, similarly to how some detectives are spun around in noir stuff from time to time. Chinatown is a prime example that comes in, like Jake, who played by Jack Nicholson. Similar idea where he is just being sent around to do things, but isn't really sure of the full scope of what's going down. It's clear that Ray is also not an incredible detective, but he is the fixer. He's the best that they got.
Yep. So all right. So to summarize, we got our two detectives that we know so far are Velcoro and Bezzerides, and then we also have for cops we have now the lieutenant of Vinci, which is Kevin Burris, and then we have William Holloway, who is the chief of Vinci. So it's a lot of characters that they throw at us right away. Now we get introduced to our third cop, Paul Woodrugh. So he's part of California Highway Patrol, and he's basically running patrol when he sees this car kind of just pull in out of nowhere. It obviously is reckless driving, so he pulls the vehicle over, and it turns out it's this like hot blonde chick driving. And when he asks for the license and stuff, she clearly doesn't have it, and she might be drunk right now. So he asks her to step out of the car, and she basically offers sex, essentially, if he just lets her off, because she's like, yeah, I don't have my license. I left it at home. And we don't see what Woodrugh actually says. We don't see what Paul Woodrugh says. And let me pull it. We don't see what Woodrugh says, but we then immediately cut to a scene where he's back at his, Highway Patrol's office, and he's talking to his superior, and we find out that Woodrugh has actually been suspended, or he's on leave with pay, because that woman claimed that Woodrugh tried to like basically coerce her into giving a blowjob to let him off, and then she reported him or filed a complaint or something. So now his name's kind of just in the mud, and he's like, dude, I never did that. Come on, she's totally in the wrong. She was, and to his credit, his boss is like, listen, I believe you, but there's just nothing I can do about this right now. You just have to wait till Internal Affairs, I think, finishes their investigation, and you'll get paid during this time. And they both know that Woodrugh has some skeletons in the closet, though, because they mentioned this thing called like Blackwater or Black Mountain. Is it Black Mountain?
Yeah, Black Mountain, but it is actually based off of Blackwater.
Yeah. So basically, or at first, like his boss was like, hey, you'll be back in no time. And then Woodrough's like, I want to be on the bike. Like, I really want to be riding on the highway and stuff like that. And as he's leaving, that's when his boss says, hey, like, that Black Mountain stuff you were working on. And nothing more is really said. Woodrough's just like, yeah, we were working for America, sir. So they did some sinister shit. And as he's walking out, the rest of the office just kind of laughing at him. So we meet Paul Woodrugh.
He's a good soldier, man. The whole Black Mountain thing he was involved in is drawn inspiration from Blackwater, which was a private military contracting force that the U.S. used a lot of, especially in various conflicts in the Middle East, that they did some pretty unsavory shit. We'll just put it that way. So he's the guy who does what it takes to be able to put on for the country and provide for whoever's employing him. Um, so he's going to be a pretty complex character in terms of unpacking what exactly went down when he was involved in Black Mountain.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. I'm gonna have to take a water break at some point in here, but we'll just keep going for now. We then cut to the casino and we see this graphic called the California Central the California Central Rail Corridor, and the casino is now filled with very important people, and Frank Semyon is he's kind of greeting everyone, and we actually see the mayor Austin Chisani there. Give me a second. Let me pull up the Chisani graphic. All right, there we go. Chisani's there, and he's just this absolute fucking sleazebag, and he's the mayor of Vinci, and he's pissed about the newspaper story too, but he says, you know what, fuck that. It doesn't matter. If the federal contracts come through, then, whatever. They can do whatever they want. So there's a lot of money to be made on whatever deal Frank is pitching tonight, and Frank tells the mayor, hey, don't worry about the newspaper at all. And then Frank is talking to his right-hand man, Blake, again, and Blake has found the same intel about Caspere. Caspere hasn't been at work in 2 days. So now it's getting a little bit worrisome because Frank says this entire pitch on the California Central Rail Corridor is Ben Caspere's pitch. And if he's not there, this is going to be a problem. So, and on top of that, Osip has just landed. So Osip is late, but he's landed. So quick little detour there. What did you think, Damon?
You take a look at Frank's goal to be the gangster who climbs the ladder into legitimacy, and he's going to have to do certain dirty work for people like the mayor. Trisani doesn't seem like a really cool guy. The limited amounts we've seen of him, he seems like a complete dickhead. So he is scrambling right now. Frank is feeling the heat because for Frank to be accepted into this boys club and to be able to be initiated out of the street life and then given something of substance, he's got to be the one pulling everything together. Right now, it's all just going to shit.
Yeah. Good points there. Yeah, Chisani is it was such a good casting decision to get this dude as the mayor.
Yep.
He just looks like such a fucking sleazeball. All right, let's keep it moving. So then we see Velcoro and we meet Officer or Detective Teague Dixon, and he's the one who both Lieutenant Burris and Chief Holloway were insisting that Velcoro work with. So he just looks like another sleazebag, just like a lazy fuck. And
Yep.
they're now at the city manager's office, which is where Caspere was working until he disappeared. And they're interviewing his assistant. She goes by Erica, and she's only been working as his assistant for 6 weeks, but they're talking to her, and basically she's just like, yeah, this disappearance is weird. He wouldn't just disappear like this. And when they ask if he has any enemies, obvious enemies, she's like, not really, but he's an important man because he's the city manager, so like he's still someone who has a lot of power and influence. And there's this one point where they ask, hey, can you give us a list of the city manager's properties that he owns? And she's like, yeah, I can. And then T. Dixon is just like, he's like, yeah, of course you can. We're cops, And it's just so fucking sleazy. And then they pull up to the actual house, and he lives, like, we don't see the front of the house, but we kind of see the background, and we see that it's a great view, and we see the entrance, and the entrance is like very regal. So it's clear that Ben Caspere had a fuck ton of money, and they break in, and there's just a ton of like sex objects and stuff in the house. Like, this dude was clearly, an absolute sex fiend, and the inside is pretty trashed, and it's like, it's big. It's just like, it's in shambles. It looks like a big fight went down. There's some portraits of naked women. There's just like some sculptures of penises. And then, they check his office, and they see that his laptop has been stolen. And based on that, Velcoro's like, this was clearly a kidnapping. We got to phone this in. And Dixon's like, what? You think it's a kidnapping? And Velcoro's like, obviously. So, yeah, let's stop there.
Dude, Dixon is such a great A schlub.
I know.
Out of all these guys we've seen from the Vinci side, like, name me a show where a higher proportion of guys have had close-ups with 5 o'clock shadow. Like, this show is just they just went hard on that aesthetic. Um, Dixon, yeah, he's probably even dirtier of a cop than Velcoro, like by far. Casper, another weird ass dude. But this, all of this stuff being played in, there probably are people that exist like this, and there probably are like conspiracies that have gone down relating to dudes like this. Seems like he was asking for trouble, especially if we know he was connected to what they call the Russian River Valley, which probably connects to like the idea of whoever else is being brought in to invest as well, because Frank is in cahoots with the Russians. So he's got his hand in a lot of different pots, in addition to being kind of a pervert.
Yep. Absolutely. It's always weird when like a government official, like a city official, is living in that massive of a house. It's just
Yeah, like where'd you get that money,
where'd you
man? I
get?
know you only make 60K a year. Where you getting that money?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now we finally meet Osip. So we were back at the casino, and Osip finally arrives, and he Osip immediately kind of like tries to big dog Frank. So he makes a few comments. He's clearly older than Frank, but he makes a few interesting comments. He first as he greets Frank. Well, first of all, he's late, so it's already disrespectful. But then he tells, he makes a comment like, "Oh, Frank, he was a man in the '90s. He was a terror." And this is supposed to take place in 2015, so he's basically saying Frank is way washed up, and Frank knows what that comment means, and he also tells Frank the good life suits you. So he's basically saying Frank's gotten soft, he's gotten fat, and because he's not really actively in the crime game right now. So Frank's been out of it for a while, and so he kind of insults Frank right in front of him, but Frank's got to be the bigger man. And then Osip's like, "Yeah, meet my attorney," and Frank hadn't met him before when they were in Paris, but so it's a tense intro meeting, and then Jordan, Frank's wife, is like, "Osip, let's go meet some, developers and stuff." And then so he walks away, and then Frank is basically telling his right hand man Blake, "We gotta find Casper. I'm gonna fuck him up if we find him." So thoughts on that? We finally meet Osip.
Excellent job characterizing that interaction. Only thing I'm going to add is when he says he's going to put his size 13s up Casper's ass, Vince Vaughn is like 6'5", so the size 13 joke is probably spot on.
Yeah, that's fair. Vince Vaughn is tall as fuck. Okay, let's keep going. Now we are actually, I'm gonna take a quick break here. I need to fucking get a sip of water.
Yeah, go for it. All right, so the next scene that we get is, again, Casper being driven in the back of the car. The only difference this time through is that we see his head kind of smacking off the window. So you see that there's a very good chance that he's dead, where before we were just kind of wondering where he went.
All right, I'm back.
Awesome.
Let's keep going. All right, so now we then see like another shot of this old man in shades, and he's continuing to be just driven around in this car, and his head just hits the window. So it's pretty safe to say that this guy is dead. Then we see Bezzerides and I think her partner's name is like Elvis or something, Elvis Alinka.
Yeah.
And so this time around, they pull up on this other farm, and they're here to serve an eviction notice, which is kind of interesting because they're just cops, and Bezzerides doesn't really want to be delivering this or foreclosure notice. And the woman who's inhabiting the house, like she has a bunch of kids and stuff, and you could tell that she's kind of struggling to make ends meet. But she's like, shouldn't cops be actually making, actual discoveries on real cases instead of like fucking evicting us and stuff? And Bezzerides and Alinka are just like, yeah, like, we're sorry, like, we have to do what we have to do. And then this woman says, why don't you guys actually be real police and find my missing sister Vera? And this actually piques Annie's interest, and she's like, all right, tell me more about Vera. And we learn that Vera is like 24. She's she's been gone for a few weeks now, and when they reached out to where she lived, her roommate said that she's been gone for maybe a month plus or whatever. Either way, she's gone, and her phone's disconnected, and none of her stuff is at her other apartment, and her roommate does not know where she's at. So then Bezzerides is like, all right, does your sister Vera have a job? And this woman says she did, but then she quit. And Bezzerides tells her, well, come down and file a report with the police. But apparently this woman already did file a report, and the police haven't done anything about it. And she does say this last place that her sister worked at was this religious place. I don't know how to pronounce this, Damon. What is it, like Panticapaum? Panticapaum?
Panticapacum, yeah.
Panticapacum? Jesus. Whatever. Panta. I'm just gonna say Panta. That's where Vera
Panticapacum.
Panticapacum.
Yeah.
So that's where what a ridiculous name. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is another example of just something in the season that was unnecessarily complicated.
So it's so unnecessarily complicated because it is drawn from it's an ancient Greek city that was like a reference to like 6th century BC, 7th century BC. So Nick thought he was in his bag on this one.
I could see him being like, I'm in my bag as he's doing this. It's just
in a way he was.
In a way he was.
I mean?
In a way he was. I don't know why. It just didn't fit in this context. But Bezzerides' reaction to this is it's clear that she's very familiar with Panticapaum, Homo sapien. Dude, I don't know. I'm just gonna say Panta. I am not gonna fucking be able to do this. Yeah. You want to pause there and make some comments on that?
Yeah, for sure. Connections to season 1 here. We have a missing girl on the scene, and then Annie feeling disillusioned with her own police work due to lack of justice, especially after that bust went down that her sister was actually raided on, and that didn't produce anything of note. So she's hungry to make some sort of a positive difference here. We know that she's one of the good ones. The fact that she knows about this Panticapacum place and it's like a religious institute definitely clues us in that we got more to Annie to investigate as well.
Yes. All right, let's jump ahead. I like these shots of. Do you know where they filmed to get these shots of these like oil refineries or factories and stuff like that?
No, but it's fascinating, and I think they actually built the casino. Give me a quick Google. I think they built the casino set to be able to capture that, which is it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's
it's actually the Normandy Casino Card Club at in Gardena, California. Okay.
Yeah, I love this season. Was well shot. Like, it had a good aesthetic.
Yeah.
Guys sound like a fucking snob. All right, back to the casino.
I promise you, we are not.
Yeah, yeah. So we're at the casino now. Frank's giving the pitch because Casper's not there, and the pitch is pretty simple. There's some act that was just passed, Proposition 1, that basically has greenlit the construction of a $68 billion high-speed rail. I will say they needed to flesh out the finances of this a little bit better, of how it all tied together. But I think what happened is, or maybe I'm just an idiot, but whatever. There's this high-speed rail that's been greenlit to be built along Central California. Now, that would obviously change the flow of traffic. It would make it way easier for people to get everywhere. So all the land in that, around the rail would become more valuable because there'd be just more people going in and out. More businesses would have activity, all that stuff. So, and on top of that, that same land is like really cheap right now. It hasn't already been developed. So it's basically just empty land. And a lot of that land has been purchased by several holding companies. And the holding companies are basically just buying low on that land because they already have inside information that this rail project is gonna get funded. It's gonna be $68 billion. So they're just getting ahead of it so they can flip the land for like hundreds, 100 times more or whatever, like some crazy shit. And so there'll be hundreds of millions in federal grants, and the feds have cost overages. So there's just gonna be a lot of building, a lot of investment there, and no one's trying to cut corners, or they're trying to cut corners in terms of just like stealing the money essentially, but no one's trying to like cut costs. Like, it's just whatever it takes to get this done needs to be done. So there's just a lot of money here for them to essentially just get cheap investments, and this is just insider trading essentially. And Frank gives a pretty good presentation, and that's that. What did you think about that? That's the plan.
This ties into Chinatown quite a bit. the movie that I keep mentioning, and I swear to God, it is well worth the watch. But there are like land deals and water deals within that movie, and that's a heavy noir film. So we see like another commonality here. Frank dropping terms like the feds in the middle of when he's talking is a nice way to remind us for the dialogue that this guy used to be a gangster and is try to like, come out of it, but it's not quite believable yet. So, you know, if I'm going to rag on the dialogue when it's not great, I got to give it props where it's due as well.
That is a great fucking point. That's a great fucking point, man. Um, yeah, and I think it's implied, and we'll find out more. But basically, it's implied that Frank's angle in this is that he's gonna get in on some of the land early on, and but he needs Osip's money as well to actually buy the parcel of land. And
Yeah.
once this development happens, they can flip it for maybe 100 mil or something. Uh, and we'll get more info on that, but. So now we see Bezzerides and Alinka, aka she calls him Elvis. They pull up to Panticapacum, whatever. I'm just Panta. They pull up to Panta, and it's like this like pseudo, or it's like this religious institute or whatever. I don't know what they really preach, like some spirituality or whatever, some philosophy. And her dad is actually this guy named Elliot Bezzerides, and he's the one who is giving a lecture right now. So let me see. I think he's played by the villain. And did you ever watch Disturbia?
Yeah, I think that's him, and I think he's in the Green Mile too, isn't he?
I haven't watched Green Mile. I'm a bad
Oh,
person. I'm a
you got to
bad
get on
person, dude.
that.
Um, oh, quick. We got a chat from Rip Van Winkle. What's up, folks? What do you think of Fargo season 1 and 2? I have not watched it yet. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, incredible seasons of TV. If we can get Chen to get on it, we can definitely cover that at some point.
If we get listen, I'll cover Fargo for sure. I'll cover Fargo once we figure out like this new schedule. Uh, we'll try. We'll like it's something that I'm thinking about, and we'll probably end up covering
Yeah.
it. But all right, back to the game. All right, so she's watching her dad preach, blah blah blah, and then afterwards, she goes and talks to him, and is basically like, or actually no, they're at first she kind of leaves the lecture. She goes to talk to some of the cleaning people because to ask them, hey, like, did you work with this woman Vera? And the cleaning people say yes. 2 months ago she quit, and then she said she got a new job working this club circuit, and it's fewer hours, like way more money, and that's it. And she mentioned something in Sonoma, and so they're interviewing staff, and that's the info that they get. I'm gonna pause there actually.
Yeah, I took this whole Panticapacum thing to be like
Dude,
one of those
dude, you're crushing it. I can't do it, dude.
one of those like a woo-woo group out west that was definitely a big deal in the mid to late 1900s. The Ginsberg that he talks about when he's preaching, Annie's father, was probably Allen Ginsberg, who was a big time writer and spiritualist back in the 50s and 60s. A lot of themes on spirituality. That dude you're mentioning, Chen, the actor, David Morse, he played one of the guards in the Green Mile. Just a naturally serious face most of the time. I don't know how else to put it. Like he just doesn't smile a whole lot, and even when he does, it's not really relaxed.
Yeah,
But Annie is definitely not in agreement with what happened to her in her past. Like she definitely has some reservations about being raised in this religious area, which I mean, it does seem kind of weird where they're at.
yeah, and we'll get to that. And so while this investigation at this religious institute is going on, we see some pictures being taken of Casper's demolished place. So clearly Velcoro has called it in as a kidnapping. And speaking of Velcoro, he's swigging from the bottle. I'm doing a little bit of light swigging from the bottle right now too, Damon. It's been a long 7 days, but I swear I'm not depressed. But so Velcoro is swigging from the bottle. He's staking out this house, this apartment, and it's the house of the reporters who is in the middle of writing that 8-part series exposing everyone in Vinci, and his name is Dan Hauser. Dan does not stand a chance against a savage like fucking Velcoro. So Slightly buzzed. So as Dan goes up in his apartment, Velcoro masks up, looks at a junkie, is just like, shh, don't say anything. And then just goes in and beats the shit out of this reporter. we don't even see him actually beat him up. We just hear all the punches landing, and then we see the blinds like moving around violently. So, anything to add there?
Like I said before, man, Ray just has that darkness to him. He's constantly on edge. And whenever you see a guy on edge approach the dark liquor, gloves, and ski mask trifecta, you know the carnage is about to ensue. So this is some of that payback to Frank from back in the day coming to rear its head.
Yes. All right, back to the Religious Institute. What's it called again, Damon?
Panticapacum.
Panticapacum. So Bezzerides is talking to her dad now, and she's like, "Hey, did you see Vera?" And he says, "I might have seen her once or twice, but we literally never really talked, and I don't even know her name." So that's that. It doesn't seem like he's lying. He seems like a pretty chill dude. And they quickly just have this father-daughter sort of argument about how she was parented. And so first, the thing that sets off Bezzerides is that her dad, Elliot, knows about Athena basically doing webcam stuff, and he's fine with it. And I think it also bothers Bezzerides that, or Annie, that like it seems like her sister and her dad have a closer relationship than they do. And her dad's whole philosophy is basically like, I'm not going to try to get anyone to do anything ever. He's just like the ultimate laissez-faire dude. And he doesn't think it's his place to try to impose his will on anyone. And so he's fine with what Athena's doing. And meanwhile, Ani Bezzerides is not happy about it. And then they get into a bit of an argument where we kind of learn that I think the mom committed suicide. And I think like Annie blames her dad because she thinks that her dad could have like done something to stop it. And I think her dad's philosophy is just like, he kind of says like, look, there was nothing I could do. And also your mom was like, what she did was irresponsible. Like that's kind of what he says. He kind of says that she wasted her talent and what she did was irresponsible. And I raised you guys instead and did what I had to do. And dude, he kind of cooks. I'm not going to lie, man. Like Annie kind of doesn't even have a rebuttal for that. And then he basically says like, Anne, you're mad at men and you just blame men for everything. That's your entire personality. And you blame, like you see me as a representation of the things that you don't like. You don't even like your job. And her one response is just like, go talk to your fucking daughter, aka her younger sister. And that's it. So he kind of like crushes her, bro.
He gets so preachy too, and he basically is like, yeah, gee, your mom would have been a great actress if she was as dramatic in her work as she was in our marriage. Like it was, for a guy who seemed like he was walking the moral righteous path, he definitely hit some low blows in there. There is a nice little noir tie-in too, because you got to have a connection to the entertainment industry if you're going to have this in the Hollywood area. So Annie's mom being like a prospective actor back in the day is an interesting little wrinkle to put in there. This is a little bit of a bone to pick. So a lot of the psychological and philosophical investigation in season 1 was super interesting, right? That was sort of the lifeblood of the show in a lot of ways. You can tell they're just trying to heap that on the plate in episode 1 of season 2, but it's not really coming across as interesting to me. Not as like organic, like it's kind of just being like shoveled in. We're like, we get what you're doing, but like all these complicated character situations and all of this philosophical these layers that were pulled back took time, took patience, and it just doesn't feel the same.
That is well said, man. That's because you're so right. Because season 1, you get those scenes gradually where they're kind of like investigating this religious crime in a way, right? It's almost like it's like Satanism or whatever, or some sort of like it's some cult, right? And then throughout it, they like hit the church, and they hit multiple churches and all these things, and that unravels, like you said, over the course of several episodes, where you slowly start to see kind of like how Marty views the world, how he wants to view the world versus how he actually acts, versus fucking Russ, who is very clear and knows exactly what he feels about the world, and he's been impacted by a lot of like fucked up shit in his life. And you're right, it creeps up on you. Whereas this right here, he's just kind of telling it,
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump forward. So after this scene, We see Velcoro. He's at school again to go see Chad, but it's not really his visitation time. So he's kind of breaking the rules right now because he's supposed to go next weekend. So he's supposed to see him once every 2 weeks, I think. So he's here to drop off this camping set, and I think like at this point 2 weeks has passed by because Chad's basically like, yeah, the camping trip was last weekend. So I think at the beginning of the episode, right, Chad was saying the camping trip was this upcoming weekend. So I think like a week to 2 weeks has passed by basically throughout the course of the event so far. And we see Chad's stepdad, Richard, basically telling Ray like, yeah, Chad didn't go to the camping trip, but whatever. And Richard doesn't seem like a bad guy. He's kind of just like, Ray's a bad guy. So like Ray means well, but Ray's a bad guy. So Richard's like looking out for Chad and just be like, hey, your father is a dangerous fucking man. And he can tell that Velcoro's been drinking, and Velcoro snipes that the shoes that he gave Chad are gone. And Chad lies and says, oh, I don't know what happened to them. And then Velcoro sees some blood on Chad's clothes, and he gets like really aggressive with his son. And he basically says like, what the fuck happened to those shoes? And then his son won't say anything. And then he calls his son a fat pussy and says like, he'll spank him in front of the entire, all the cheerleaders if he doesn't give a name. So like he gets super violent with his son, and Chad spits out a name. He says it was this kid Ass-Pen, and Velcoro's like, that's a boy's name.
just veers into the toxic waste dump, man. Toxic.
Just 80s bully shit. Like it's a boy's name. And then Richard's like, dude, you gotta fucking chill, bro. But Velcoro's, you don't really want to fight Velcoro. So when Velcoro gets mad, Richard even backs off. He's just like, listen, like you're out of line. And Velcoro knows he's out of line. And then so afterwards, Velcoro hasn't left the lot yet, and he's just recording voice notes to Chad. And he just says, yeah, like what happened was really bad. And I used to want to be an astronaut, but astronauts don't even go to the moon anymore. That's a fucking absurd line, bro. But yeah, he's like dropping philosophical bombs in the voice notes, like trying to apologize to Chad. And that's interrupted because then he gets someone hits him up on like the police dispatchers, like, hey, that address that Conroy address you wanted, like here it is. I forget what that address is actually for, but we'll find out later in this episode. But yeah, what'd you think about Velcoro's freak out on his son?
It is ironic that his kid is named Chad.
Yeah.
because of just the way that he like interacts with them. He's trying to be a good dad, but as is the case with Ray, the attempts don't really totally land here. When he's talking about like how he's not trying to make his kid anxious, he's just there to try to like help him out, and then he just gives him the don't look at him, look at me when he's talking about like how he lost the shoes. Gets pretty dark pretty quick. Seems like the recording his feelings thing is a better strategy because he obviously loses his shit in the heat of the moment. We can safely assume he's been on a bender for the better part of 2 weeks, right? Because he forgets when the camping trip was.
Yeah.
And like he's just been boozing probably worse ever since then. The astronaut line, you know what? I see what they were going for. Ray is an angry, disappointed man, disappointed in the way things have turned out and his own existence. So maybe he's going that way. And then he does hit a J at the end to calm down. So hopefully he can equalize here.
Oh, that is a J. I didn't even notice that. Okay, so we keep going, and then we see this is Ani Bezzerides and Linka. They're driving back from that religious place, and her partner tries to like kind of say something about her dad, like, "Hey, your dad's kind of a crazy dude," and Annie just shuts it down right away. It's like, yeah, don't say shit about my family. And then, oh god, dude, I fucking every time, dude, Damon, every episode of
you got it, yep.
It's just fucking ass cheeks pop up on the screen, bro. God, fucking damn it. Thank God no one watches our stream. It's like, but all right, so we'll keep it going. And so Annie gets back to the to the station, and we see like all these dudes in the locker room, and she's the only woman in the locker room. So it just goes to show like how isolated she is. Dude, I gotta say, on rewatch, these scenes were pretty fucking good. Like the
way this is shot is perfect.
Yeah, it really was good. So and then she keeps a knife in her boot essentially. So just a quick scene there. Damon, I'm going to jump ahead if you don't have any comments on that.
Nope, keep it rolling.
All right. So then we cut to Woodrugh, who we haven't heard from in a while, and he comes home, and he's got this fucking sexy ass girlfriend named Emily, and Emily wants to fuck, and Woodrough's like, I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. So he goes to the bathroom, and he just starts popping some Viagra in the bathroom. So this part's obviously interesting because Woodrugh is like relatively young. He's in good shape. Like, why would he need Viagra? He's not like fucking 60 yet, and he's got these scars on his body. He's clearly a man that's been through a lot. So then when he finally comes out of the bathroom, she's like, his girlfriend Emily doesn't know that he's on Viagra. And so she's like, why are you in there for 30 minutes? He's just like, yeah, sorry, I had to work some kinks out. And she just starts giving him another ass cheek shot. All right, I'm just going to stay here. But yeah, Woodrugh and his girl, Emily.
Yeah, you can tell something strange is going down. And you also notice the chemical burns on his shoulder. Something that definitely went down overseas. He's a cagey man. I don't know how else to explain him. Like, he's just a very cagey figure. The only thing I'd ever really seen him in before this was Friday Night Lights. So seeing him in this role, it took some time to adjust to him. And I think a lot of people fell off these first couple episodes when it first came out because of adjusting to having like basically Tim Riggins playing this dude and then Vince Vaughn playing a gangster with all these campy lines. And that was part of what people's apprehension might be. But I think kind of like Vince, he warms up as the season goes on.
Yeah, I agree. I only watched a few seasons of Friday Night Lights, but I knew him from the craziest movie ever, which was I Am John Carter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a forgettable movie, but I actually liked it. Yeah. But all right, so we then cut to Frank, and he's having his meeting with Osip, and Osip right now he's getting cold feet about this deal, and Frank doesn't know if it's because Casper's not here or something else, and Osip's just like, listen, I gotta I'll think about it over dinner, and just don't rush me. And Frank says, look, we agreed on that. You're gonna buy in, like you agreed to buy in, and we hear this holding company, and its name's Catalyst. So according to Frank, the holding company Catalyst is one of the holding companies that has bought up a chunk of this underdeveloped land, and Frank's is affiliated with Catalyst, or Catalyst is on his side on this deal. And Osip was supposed to pitch in some money to get it done, and Osip's just like, yeah, listen, like I'm just falling back right now, and I just got to be careful with making deals. I got to do due diligence, like I got to consult with my people. He's obviously full of shit. He can make the deal happen right now, but there's nothing Frank can do. He has to just kind of let him stall, and this pisses Frank off. And I guess Frank makes a comment, Damon, where he says, we could be one of these, like, there's a chance for us, for our grandkids to be part of one of those old California families, like, don't even remember where the money comes from. So these, like, he's probably expecting to make, like, in the 9 figures, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. He wants the same sort of package that a lot of people that you would not expect have these days, where once you get the money, no one really cares if it's old money or new money, right? Like you can wash away however you made that cash, wash away whatever you had to step over to get there. He just wants that to set his family up for the future. And you can even see like a little bit of the imposter syndrome creeping into how he's been acting, especially in like situations with Osip.
Yep. And Frank is pissed because Casper's still fucking gone, and it's fucking this whole deal up. Okay, this next scene is crazy. And I'll say this, wow. When I first watched this season, I think I did try to watch it in 2015. I stopped watching after episode 2, but I was just too busy at that time. And it was like a very confusing show. But this was the scene I remember that made Velcoro my favorite character. Which maybe says some stuff about me, because this is a fucking crazy scene. Now I'm realizing it's like not it's not a good look for me. But
it's quite a Rorschach test.
Yeah. It's like So Velcoro is staking out the kid Aspen's house, who's the one he knows that's been bullying his son Chad. So he talks to Aspen's dad. He's just like, yeah, I want to talk to your son. I gotta ask him about some stolen property. And the dad's name is Wit. And like, he knows it's a bad idea to let his son talk to Velcoro, but Velcoro's a pretty intimidating guy. So Wit's like, fine. And as he goes and grabs his son, Velcoro fucking puts on some brass knuckles, which is just crazy. He could have fucking killed him. And Aspen comes out. He's terrified because just look at this fucking man, Velcoro. He's scary as hell. And Velcoro just immediately just goes, "You like to bully kids, Ass-Pen?"
It was almost comical the way that he delivered that in there, man.
Oh, man. So he drops that crazy ass line, and then, Wit immediately is just like, dude, wait, what? And then Velcoro just fucking punches Wit right in the gut and just basically just like fucks him up. And then he headlocks, or Aspen tries to charge Velcoro to get him to stop, but he headlocks the kid. It's just like, watch this. This is all you. Like, as he just beats the shit out of the kid's dad. So he's holding the kid in a headlock while beating up the kid's dad. The kid's like crying, and then he basically he traumatizes this kid for life. He goes, if you ever bully or hurt anyone again, like I'll ass fuck your dad with your mom's headless corpse. So he threatens to basically rape and sodomize his dad and murder his mom. So that's an insane threat, and he walks off. And the dad is probably has like a broken orbital bones and shit like that, and that's Velcoro delivering justice. Maybe I take back what I just said, but I don't know, man. But yeah, let's take a break on this scene here.
That's when you first watch this scene, you're like, oh yeah, he's getting the bully back, and then you're like, oh, this is just too much. Like, if you're this 12-year-old kid looking up at this clearly inebriated cop with brass knuckles on and hair slicked back, going to town on your dad, like that's some shit, man. And then the closing line, which the headless corpse line, I get it. There's a place for it in terms of just like sheer shock value. And we know Ray's a sicko. He's a crazy man. So like, we get it. But 12 years old, my ass. Then a little bit of a pause. Fuck you. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's keep going. All right, right here. All right, then we get a quick cut of what's his face, Caspere. It's nighttime now. He's still just passed out or dead, and this car is just driving him and pulling over on the side of the highway, and that's that. Then we see Woodrugh, and he can't fall asleep, and he's in bed with his girlfriend, and he's just like, yeah, I gotta go. And she's obviously suspicious as hell. She's like, what's going on? Like, are you, why don't you ever stay the night? Are you like, what are you doing? And he gives like a bullshit excuse. He's like, oh yeah, I gotta go do some work right now. And we could tell that he never really stays over the night, and it's something that bothers Emily. And Paul assures her, hey, it's not anyone else. I just gotta do some work. And he rides off, and we see what he's actually doing is just basically coming close to killing himself every night. He gets on his motorbike and he just revs it as fast as he fucking can, and yeah, is probably just hoping that he loses controls and dies.
He loves the bike, man. That's what he keeps saying. I just want to be out there on the bike, man.
I just want to be out there on the bike, and he's obviously dealing and struggling with some things right now. Then we see Velcoro, and he's now meeting with Frank at this dive bar. There's this woman, or this younger girl, who keeps singing these like the saddest songs ever, and she's kind of performing live music, and there's not that many people at the bar, and it's just this sad little place. And Frank is speaking with Velcoro, and Velcoro basically tells him like, hey, I silenced the reporter, that story is cooked. And in exchange, Frank gives Velcoro some cash, and they kind of talk a little bit, and Frank checks up on Velcoro. We learned that the lawyer is actually from Frank. So Frank's the one giving Velcoro the lawyer, and he's wondering, how the case with the kid is going. And Velcoro is like, it's going to be tough, obviously, no matter what. And they talk a little bit more, and we know that Velcoro is not seeing anyone. And Frank also mentions that he and his wife have been trying to conceive, and they're now using, IVF. And yeah, it's just a little conversation that just kind of reveals a little bit about them. And then Frank's like, all right, I got to go, take care. And it's an interesting relationship that they have, but I'm going to pause it here.
Yeah, I personally love all of these scenes in the dive bar downstairs. I think this season nailed all of the sets. It nailed character relationships, and this is just a key example of it playing out. Some of these lines are pretty awesome too, where Frank is telling Ray he should get a girl, like a good woman mitigates our baser tendencies, because Frank knows that Ray is a lot like him in the sense that they're both savages at heart.
Yep.
When it comes down to like what they're up to. This was a great closing scene here. I don't know about the line. I ain't looking forward to jerking off in no cup, but we will give Frank a one-off line every scene just to do something like that. It's a miserable backdrop. It's bleak, and both of these guys are in a bleak spot. Feeds into the nihilism that's rampant in a lot of the noir genre. And there's like a huge sense that they live in a cruel world, and the only way to win is to take what's yours and to outduel the cruelness that you see in front of you. Like, it's just a forever battle to the top against the forces of evil. And you might get a little evil like on your way to the top too.
Damn, that was poetry, man.
Something like that.
Something like that. No, seriously, that was great. This is making me want to read a noir novel. So if you do end up watching this replay and you got to this point, you got this far, I would say Congratulations. And at the same time, drop any noir recommendations. All right, so we also see what Bezzerides is up to, and she's also just getting blackout drunk and gambling. And then so it basically just has a montage between our three detectives where we see that they're all not very happy. And then the focus is now on Woodrugh, who's really getting up to 100 miles an hour on the bike. And he almost like does it. He almost kills himself, but he swerves and stops at the last minute on the side. And he kind of shines his light and sees this old man just sitting on a picnic bench, a picnic table. So he walks over and he's like, "Hey." And the dude we see is the old guy that we've been seeing this entire time being driven around. And he's got the shades on, and Woodrugh checks on him and finds his wallet and looks at the license, and it is none other than Ben Caspere, and he is dead. So this is where Caspere has been. He just got dropped off on the side of the road, and now our kidnapped city manager, Vinci, is confirmed dead. Woodrugh makes the call. We see, meanwhile, that Velcoro has passed out, hammered at this bar, and the owner of the bar, this woman, I forget her name. Do you know her name, Damon?
Not off the top of my head, no.
We'll get it for you guys next stream. We're going to slowly build up into this story because there's a lot of random characters that end up being important, but Velcoro's passed out, and she has a soft spot for Ray, and she's kind of
Felicia.
Nice, good call. So Felicia runs the bar, and she's got this scar on her face, which indicates that she's kind of been through some abuse and shit, or some battles. And she kind of like tells all the cleaning people, let Frank just kind of pass out. Then we see that Bezzerides has gotten herself kicked out of the casino. Is that the Vinci Gardens casino? Or is that a different casino? I think it's a different casino.
I think it's a different one.
Different one. So she has gotten pissed drunk and gotten kicked out of the casino. So they all get phone calls at the same time, and it's basically the calls alerting them to Caspere's death. Now, the reason why, obviously, Velcoro gets the call, and so Caspere is discovered in Ventura County. So that's an important detail. So the reason why fucking Velcoro gets the call is because Caspere is the city manager of Vinci, and Velcoro works for Vinci PD, and so that's the affiliation. That's why Velcoro gets the call, because it is Vinci's city manager. The reason why Bezzerides gets the call is because it's in her county. She's a detective in Ventura County, right? Does this sound right so far, Damon? Yeah. So that's why she gets the call. So this is her jurisdiction because it's in her county, but Velcoro is involved because it's his city's city manager, and Woodrugh obviously found the body, so that's the only reason why he's involved. And actually, well, technically it's on the side of the highway, so it could be his jurisdiction as well. So
interstate, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what brings all these detectives together. I felt like if they had just explained that a little bit in a different way, like it was very quick, right? It was all like one-liners to like explain why that all that happened. So you could be in the middle of episode 6 being like, wait, why are these guys all together again? Like, why are they all chilling? But they all get called over and they see the body, and we see that this is pretty gruesome, but Caspere's eyes have been burned out with acid. So that's why the shades were on. So he got fucking tortured and fucked up. And Velcoro shows up last minute, late, because he's probably hammered still. And all of these detectives now are eyeing each other down, and they don't really trust each other. And the episode ends right there.
Yeah, you get your classic jurisdiction jumble to form the team. It's not super realistic, but like, it's television, so you got to roll with it. But I do remember, I got to own this. I do remember being critical of some moments in season 4 where it was like, damn, that just worked out a little too well for like the work they put in. For Woodrugh to just go speeding to like an almost imminent death and then pull over at the last minute and swerve into the area next to Caspere's body was a pretty lucky coincidence.
Yeah, that was super fucking gamey. Just had like, they could have just written that a little bit better, right? Just had
I think so.
Yeah, just had a different situation for how Woodrugh stumbles upon the body. But yeah, I mean, that's episode 1. We get introduced to kind of the main, like we see a lot of the different cops. We see the detectives. We see like the city officials, and we now have found Ben Caspere. Any final thoughts on this episode before we close?
It's Vinci, and this whole season encompasses a very dark world. If you guys can hang with us through the first couple episodes, I promise you the season finishes strong.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And I think right now we're an hour 16. Like, that's not bad for the length of this stream. Because I legitimately thought after the first 20 minutes that this was going to be a 3-hour stream. So thank God. And yeah, we just got to keep going through this because there's a lot of different small details. And then once you kind of pick up on the details and just remember them, then
it gets way better.
It just gets way better. This season gets way better. So yeah, that's all there is to say. Appreciate everyone for watching, and we'll catch y'all later.
Take it easy.